in a big way through urbanization. Honorable Speaker, a population of 2,000, 3,000 houses, people coming to be housed in a project of 700 houses, or 1,000 houses that will probably accommodate 3,000, 4,000 people. That population itself is an opportunity for new markets, Honorable Speaker. It is that urbanization that helps economies grow. It is those opportunities that we must look at. I know there is a temptation, Honorable Speaker, to speak to what is popular to the middle class, to speak to what we think we are speaking to the gallery, to those who have access to our TV stations, Honorable Speaker. It is very tempting, Honorable Speaker, to speak to the less than 10% of our population today who today have a pay slip. But let us have the heart to speak for another close to 40 million Kenyans who have no access to job opportunities today. Those job opportunities lie in this bill, Honorable Speaker. Those job opportunities, Honorable Speaker, outweigh the political expediency that we have seen in those who critique this bill, Honorable Speaker. I am happy, Honorable Speaker, 3 weeks ago, I listened to our good friend, the former Prime Minister, Honorable Raila Odinga, contend that indeed in the Azimio manifesto, they had this levy at 1.5%, Honorable Speaker. Contend that it was during his time as Minister for Public Works, Housing and Roads that the housing agenda in this country was conceived. Honorable Speaker, I've also had occasion to listen to President William Ruto say that what bedevils our country is, one, corruption, vested interests, especially amongst our leadership, Honorable Speaker, and laziness. Honorable Speaker, especially in leadership. We must thank God that today the leadership in this country neither has vested interests in the running and management of government, that the leadership in this country today is determined for good. Part of that work to changing this country. Honorable Speaker, including those of us in the opposition, that is why the leader of the opposition, His Excellency Raila Odinga, contends that housing as an agenda is something that this country must actualize, because we are 20 years. Tells you what vested interests in government have done, the disservice they have done to our country, Honorable Speaker. It tells you how late we are in actualizing this agenda. And it tells us the urgency in enacting this bill today, having a new Housing Fund Act, Honorable Speaker, that will create that legal framework to actualize the housing agenda for this great country. Honorable Speaker, with those very many remarks, I beg to move, and I want to urge all of us, Honorable Speaker, as we contribute, as we critique, as we add our ideas to what will enrich this bill, Honorable Speaker, to do it having in mind, Honorable Speaker, the people back in our villages, the young men and women who patronize your offices almost on a daily basis, the young men and women that you all mobilize for political rallies, the young men and women who you see at your shopping centers stretching out their hands to Mheshimiwa. Give them something that they can be proud of. Something that they can be proud that when you are their leaders, honorable members, you give them an agenda that gives them opportunities to earn a decent living for themselves, besides providing affordable and good housing for the country and helping our country in urbanization and helping to spur economic development in a manner, Honorable Speaker, that will be unrivaled in our region. Honorable Speaker, with those many remarks, I beg to move, and I want to request the Chair Housing, the Honorable Ngeno, to second, since he was part of the team that I commended for having done a very good job through the extensive public participation. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I move.
Johanna Ngeno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And first, I want to thank the Majority Leader for the great presentation while moving this bill. Mr. Speaker, I wish also to rise as part of the committee, the joint committees that undertook the responsibility of Article 118 of the Constitution to do what the Constitution requires of us, that is a public participation, and especially on a bill that is presented before the House. Mr. Speaker, when this bill was committed to our committee, the Joint Committee of Housing, Urban Planning and Public Works, and also the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning, we started the responsibility of listening to the people of this republic. Mr. Speaker, we went to several counties, and amongst the counties that we visited, Mr. Speaker, was Nairobi County, which has the biggest problem on matters housing, Mr. Speaker. We also visited other counties, Mr. Speaker, which ordinarily people would imagine that they don't need housing, Mr. Speaker, like Turkana, Wajir, and Narok and Kajiado, Mr. Speaker. But in all our visits, Mr. Speaker, people want houses. Mr. Speaker, under Article 43B of our Constitution, Mr. Speaker, obliges the government to ensure that it creates a situation where its citizens access affordable housing, among other recommendations that goes with the affordable housing. Mr. Speaker, it is our responsibility also as a House, as Parliament, to ensure that we actualize Article 43 of our Constitution. And in that process, Mr. Speaker, we undertook to listen after looking at the bill and listen to the people of this republic. Mr. Speaker, in our findings, when we went around the country, Mr. Speaker, among the many issues which people raised was that they really want these houses. But how will they access these houses, Mr. Speaker? Equally so that not other people are prejudiced or not other people are disadvantaged. Mr. Speaker, the other question which people raised also, Mr. Speaker, is how do we build these houses? There was the question of voluntary contribution, Mr. Speaker, among the people we met. There were the questions of compulsory or voluntary and of course, a contribution that is forced. Mr. Speaker, we also listened to people who talked about how do we levy everybody, Mr. Speaker. Remember when the courts ruled, the courts ruled on the fact that there was no legal framework in place that will ensure the collection of levies was made equal so that it is not discriminatory, it touches on everybody. And these are the questions we also took. These are the questions which most of the members of the public came to ask. How is the levy going to be undertaken? Mr. Speaker, most touching was the areas that we visited, especially the slums of this country, Mr. Speaker. And in the slum areas, Mr. Speaker, people live in deplorable conditions, which every Kenyan who think this particular bill of housing is not necessary, you will need to visit those particular areas. I visited those areas myself for the first time in some other areas, for the second time in some other areas, and we realized that people need houses. The only problem is accessing these particular houses. We even visit the Maasai areas where people wanted houses that are actually the model of Manyatas. We visited Turkana, Mr. Speaker, where people wanted houses, the model of how Turkana live in those houses. We visited areas like Tana River, Mr. Speaker, where we had floods. And people think these houses come in handy to ensure that the people who are affected by floods, they called it cluster. Mr. Speaker, I also accorded the opportunity of having these particular houses. So, Mr. Speaker, I do not want to belabor much on these particular issues, but my submissions, Mr. Speaker, is number one, how do we make these houses accessible? How do we, or how does the government build these houses? Mr. Speaker, on the question of levies, people introduced many other aspects to the collection of levies. Some wanted levies to be collected and, of course, at the end of it should accrue benefits. Some made proposals to the extent that it should behave like the NSSF model, where after at the end of your retirement, you can still access that amount of money. There are so many proposals which people made, Mr. Speaker. And it is upon this House, Mr. Speaker, and in the end, to do amendments on areas where they think fits to be done. Mr. Speaker, in this particular bill, Mr. Speaker, proposes the formation of a board. And in that aspect, Mr. Speaker, many people also were asking, after collection of this money, Mr. Speaker, how is it going to be managed? How is it going to be implemented? How is it going to be fair? Mr. Speaker, there is a proposal for the formation of a board that will have also to be compliant with the Constitution. And among the many proposals, Mr. Speaker, from the members of the public, including also the professionals, they want a board that will actually manage the funds having been collected by KRA. And that board should manage the funds, allocate the funds to several categories of houses which are going to be built. And Mr. Speaker, when I say the categories of houses, we have the category of affordable housing, which is the normal housing that we know that are low cost. Another category, Mr. Speaker, are institutional housing. And remember, Mr. Speaker, the police officers, the KDF, the prison warders, and all those people who live in our institutions, who work on our institutions, live on houses that are very deplorable. Amongst the allocation of these funds, Mr. Speaker, will go towards those particular housing, Mr. Speaker. On institutional housing, Mr. Speaker, also, you remember that most of our universities do not have enough money to build hostels. And many people propose that we should allocate part of this money to build a hostel so that it can become accessible to our students wherever they are and at a cheaper rate, Mr. Speaker. Among other housing also, Mr. Speaker, which are people who are proposing for allocation of this money are social housing. These are houses like the upgrade of slums, people to move from slums to at least good houses through the social housing program. And among us also areas where people thought maybe this money should be allocated are the county governments. The issue of county governments rose in every other public meeting we had, so that it became apparent that among us, the institutions to be allocated these funds are also county governments. Mr. Speaker, the board also will be given the responsibility, because there was another issue where people are asking, after allocating this money to other institutions like the NHC, the State Department, the county governments, and all those other agencies, how will the board get back the money? Because this money has to be like a revolving fund. After selling those houses, where does that money go? Will it remain with the NHC? Will it remain with the other agencies? Mr. Speaker, the recommendations which people want is that after these houses have been built and offtake undertaken, the money should revert back to the board, to the fund, so that it can also be used to build other houses. Mr. Speaker, there was also the question of deposits, which is in this bill. Most of the citizens of this country, Mr. Speaker, feel that there are so many people who may not access enough money to pay a deposit of 10%. And Mr. Speaker, we also muled around it. And the committee felt that the question of deposit should be considered on a case-by-case situation. Mr. Speaker, people also thought, for example, the houses which are built in Nairobi or houses built in several areas. Mr. Speaker, people feel that how do we protect or how do we ring fence these houses so that it is not bought by only those who have money? Mr. Speaker, so that it can also be accessed by everybody. And Mr. Speaker, we felt that there should be regulations or regulations should be put in place that will also ring fence those particular houses to the people of those particular areas. Mr. Speaker, among the proposals also which are in this bill and people found it acceptable are the provision of loans by the board that even after all this money has been collected, those people who want to buy these houses, Mr. Speaker, and they do not have money, they can take a loan from the board so that they can buy these houses and repay the board slowly throughout the years. Mr. Speaker, lastly, there was also the issue of land, which arose in most of the cases, that the land that these monies is going to be utilized on, most of them are public land, most of them are county land, and how then will the public benefit from those particular houses, Mr. Speaker? And we muled around it, and of course, we have a section in the Land Act that deals with the conversion of land, if you want, or especially the disposition of land from public land to private land, Mr. Speaker, and we all agreed that we will leave that issue of land to the National Land Commission to deal with it. Mr. Speaker, in general, I'm among as members who sat with the members of the public. I listened to them just like the other members of my committee. And Mr. Speaker, our country, our population, 80% of the population of this country are living in shanties, temporary homes, slums. Others are living on areas where you can't imagine, Mr. Speaker. It is prudent. It is high time. And so many governments, Mr. Speaker, have run away from this responsibility. No government has dared to take the bold step which the president has taken. I also want us as this House to take that bold step to ensure, and we have had so many expenditures in this country, Mr. Speaker. I particularly have been in this House for the last 10 years. I've seen budgets go, I've seen budgets being brought to this House. Mr. Speaker, if you go to the villages, there has been so many budgets done in this House, and you don't even see them, or anything that has been undertaken in the budgets which have been allocated here. Mr. Speaker, I personally felt that let us take this bold step, pass this bill, and wait for the results. And most of us who are sitting in the oversight committees, we will ensure that the projects which have been earmarked under this particular bill, Mr. Speaker, will be put into prudent use. There are so many of us who would say, what is the use? So many of us would also say, how assured are we that we are going to build houses? I've always also said, Mr. Speaker, the appropriation of any money is done in this House. The oversight of any money allocated to the executive is done by this House. It is our responsibility, Mr. Speaker. We cannot run away from our responsibility. Just because we are lazy, we cannot oversight those monies which have been allocated. So, Mr. Speaker, I urge this House. Our people need houses. Everywhere. We went to Nyanza, we went to Western, we went to Northeastern, we went to Coast, we went to Rift Valley. Everywhere, Mr. Speaker, people need houses. It is our responsibility as a House to ensure that we actualize Article 43B of that part of the Constitution. The question of how that money is going to be spent rests in this House. It rests especially on all of us, regardless of which political divide you come from. Because every money that has been appropriated here depends on us to ensure that it is utilized properly. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I wish to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Ngeno. I now propose the question, which is that the Affordable Housing Bill, National Assembly Bill number 75 of 2023, be now read a second time. Yes, Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for having given me the first bite of the cherry. Mr. Speaker, let me start to the now very famous High Court ruling of November 2023. So you must thank our courts for having jolted the executive to do what they should have done at the first instance. But we must also take cognizance of the fact that even as we debate this bill, it's still live in court. It is still lying in the Court of Appeal, pending determination. That notwithstanding, let me make the following comments. That if you look at the bill, they state categorically that this is an act, that's a bill for an act of parliament to give effect to Article 43(1)(b) of the Constitution, to provide a framework for access to affordable housing and for connected purposes. The Speaker, from the outset, the question one would want to ask, and to ask repeatedly, how on earth is this bill once, if it is passed and it becomes law, how is it going to contribute to the realization of the right under Article 43(1)(b) of the Constitution? Mr. Speaker, it might be important for me to just read Article 43(1)(b) for the benefit of members who may not have their Constitution with them, the copies of the Constitution with them. Mr. Speaker, at Article 43(1)(b), the Constitution requires or dictates that every person has the right to accessible and adequate housing. Every person has the right to accessible and adequate housing and to reasonable standards of sanitation. And if you want to understand clearly how this bill is not solving the problem, is not addressing the matter of the realization of the right under Article 43(1)(b), you simply go to the paragraph at page 21, 26 of the bill itself. The paragraph dealing with eligibility criteria and application procedure for affordable housing unit. But before I go there, let me now thank the authors of this bill. I wish you could allow Honorable Chunga to listen to me. Let me thank the authors of this bill for having come out now clearly that unlike what we are being told, unlike what was being sold to us through the now infamous Finance Bill 2023, that it is now clear in this bill that whoever is going to contribute to this fund, this housing levy, is not guaranteed a house. That is now clear. That however much you contribute towards the housing levy, whether you are a salaried employee, you are a Juakali artisan, you are a Mkokoteni pusher, you are a boda boda rider, you are a mamamboga, there is no guarantee that you will get a house. That your contributions are not a guarantee that you will get a house. That's now clear. And if you want to confirm that, you go to the paragraph 4, on eligibility criteria and application procedure for affordable housing unit. A person qualifies to be allocated an affordable house unit if that person is a Kenyan citizen who is at least 18 years of age and holds a Kenyan identity card. And it goes on. But what is more curious is at paragraph 31, 2A. An application made under subsection 1 shall be accompanied by proof of requisite deposit approved by the relevant agency of at least 10% of the value of the affordable housing unit being applied for. Now, tell me now, who in Kenya is going to afford the 10% of the value of the affordable housing unit? Who? What we are simply doing is to create opportunities for the people who are already propertied, like you and me, people who are already wealthy, to be able to use proxies to deposit the 10% of the value of those units and acquire as many units as possible. How have you addressed the issue of access to housing under Article 43(1)(b)? Tell me. I need to be educated. Tell me. How? How, Honorable Chunga, my good friend? How? I need to be educated. So, we are simply trying to respond to the queries, the very fundamental queries that were raised by the High Court. My submission is that this bill does not cure the deficiencies that were apparent in the Finance Bill 2023. It does not cure. Mr. Speaker, you must also understand that in this country, even those people who may want decent houses to be able to move from their current dwellings, the shanties as we call them, may not be able to, as a result of other competing needs for the little money that they have. So what then should have happened? And this is something we have said over and over. We have said as Azimio over and over that we are not opposed to the issue of affordable housing. As a matter of fact, the issue of affordable housing was in our manifesto. The point of departure is the implementation. As Azimio, we would have wanted to implement this policy by simply having Parliament appropriate money from Kenyan taxpayers' money. Simply collect taxes in a normal manner and appropriate part of that money to go and construct the houses. No, you're not doing it. You are simply creating new taxes. You are simply creating new taxes earmarked for the housing units. What you are saying, what you are doing, is simply overburdening Kenyans to create houses for the benefit of a select few who are really rich and who have got houses in the first place. Mr. Speaker, you go to the implementation. They are saying they will deduct 1.5% of the gross salaries of the employees. Again, that is double taxation. Because already those employees are pay as you earn. Why can't you then even go to the net earnings? But more curiously, the employers are being compelled to match that 1.5%. But when it comes to those who are not salaried, those who are in the informal sector, who are going to be, or go again, charge this levy through a means I don't know, because I haven't read the report. The report came out too late. I'm told the amendments you're proposing. How you will raise this money from those who are not earning salaries. It is not clear who will match for them. It's not clear. For the employees like us and you, at least our employer, the PSC, the speaker is here, he will match. Yes. But for the Mahamboga, who will match for the Mahamboga, Mr. Speaker? Who will match the contribution for the border rider? Who? So shall we having two different standards which was raised by the High Court itself. And I'm being careful not to delve into the matters which are pending before the court, because that would be totally sub judice. Mr. Speaker, you can go on and on and on. The High Court raised the issue of Article 10, Subarticle 2 of the Constitution on national values, especially the matter of participation of the people. I've heard my friend Johan Ngeno eloquently say that he went to Kisumu, he went to Nakuru, he went to Garissa, and people were happy. People were welcoming them with claps and cheers, that they want houses. They were singing, Hosanna, Hosanna. The houses have arrived, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I didn't see them also. In my own county of Siaya, I didn't see them. I didn't see them, Mr. Speaker. In my own constituency of Ugunja, I didn't see them. So, how was this public participation conducted? To be able to satisfy the very rigorous requirement under Article 10, Subarticle 2 of the Constitution. How? And remember, there was also a court ruling earlier on the issue of public participation, when the court declared our public participation notice as unconstitutional. Okay? You need to learn law, some law, for you to understand that, Honorable Buyer, yeah. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, it has not been demonstrated how this public participation was effective. Okay? Finally, Mr. Speaker, because I want to leave the space for my colleagues to also contribute, let me say this, and I want to repeat, that the affordable housing policy could be a good idea. But we seem to be in a hurry. We seem to be in so much in a hurry to have it implemented. And you've heard the sentiments being expressed out there by those in the executive, that hii tutafanya mpende musipende. That language, Mr. Speaker, is very dangerous, especially on a matter which is affecting Kenyan people's pockets. Now we are being told that those hapless traders in Gekomba, in Mariakani, what do you call it, in Miritini, this place, yes. Yes, in Kongoea, in where else? In Chomoroni, in Ugunja, in Chwele, in Nyando, in Kabuchai, in wherever, in Mwingi, are now going to be followed by KRA. As at the moment this bill passes, and it is assented to and it becomes an act of parliament, those people I have mentioned, the bodabodas, the mamambogas, and the bodaboda riders must be prepared that KRA will be after them. To be able to get out the 1.5% of their earnings. How they'll compute that, I don't know. I don't know for sure. How we will compute the earnings of a bodaboda rider to be able to extract 1.5% is a miracle. Mr. Speaker, therefore, I have to grudgingly oppose this bill. I have to grudgingly oppose it. Thank you.
Manduku. Daniel Manduku.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From the onset, Mr. Speaker, I want to support the housing bill with amendments. I want to remind this House that besides giving life to Article 43, Kenya is a signatory to many statutes. These include the UN Habitat Assembly, which is a 193-member states. And besides that, Mr. Speaker, this bill gives life to Sustainable Development Goal number 11, which over time has consistently ensured that all nations comply with high-quality housing and standards of hygiene. Closer home, Mr. Speaker, allow me to give a historical perspective of where we've come from. I remember in the year 1995, as a student of architecture, during the World Habitat Day, the member for Bureti, who then was Minister of Public Works, called Kenyans and set in motion a new agenda to urbanize and develop our slums. And at that time, he came up with a mantra that we must get out of the slums. That was the late Professor Jonathan Ngeno. It has taken us 30 years, Mr. Speaker, to get where we are. We must remember that we are now 4 presidents after. And I stand here to support this because I know that this bill, if well enacted, will give economic stimulus to our country. Mr. Speaker, when you look at the national government CDF allocation to all constituencies, we stand at a mere 43 billion shillings. Today, as we stand here, the housing levy has already collected about 63 billion shillings. A simple arithmetic will tell you that in the next 2 years, every constituency will obviously get more than double the allocation of the national government CDF. How else do we expect to stimulate the local economies if we don't put emphasis on the collection of levy and spending this in the constituencies? Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I was privileged to visit more than 10 counties, and the issues that the public raised were mainly to do with the fairness of allocation of houses, the procurement of such houses, and the concern on how the 10% deposit would be raised. Madam Speaker, we have recommended that instead of having the 10%, we would look for an option of renting to own the houses. On the issue of public land being used, the National Land Commission confirmed to us that in compliance with the Land Act, Section 14 and 15 would be employed to convert public land into private land. Madam Speaker, other concerns on the quality and access of the houses are covered by various laws in this country, and I want to state here that there are not less than 10 laws that cover the construction sector. Finally, Madam Speaker, I would urge this House to urgently approve the building code, which has been in abeyance for the last 10 years, so that it can address other gaps that arise in the bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Next chance will go to the member for Kirinyaga, Honorable Njeri.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to support the housing bill, Honorable Speaker. In Kirinyaga County, Honorable Speaker, I have had and done personal visits to various sites where affordable houses are being constructed, Honorable Speaker. I have visited Gishugu constituency, Kirinyaga Center, where I found more than 300 young people, Honorable Speaker, young people who were jobless before the affordable housing program started, Honorable Speaker, who now have a place where they can go every day and earn a living, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the economic activity of the small center, Honorable Speaker, the viewpoint of the people at the ground, Honorable Speaker, is what matters when we are discussing issues to do with affordable housing, Honorable Speaker. The rest of it, Honorable Speaker, is a noise which will not stop and should never stop this House from ensuring that we have progressive programs for our people, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, it is very unfortunate that there has been so much that has been said that is negative about the affordable housing program, Honorable Speaker. The vision of the President, Honorable Speaker, is catering for the future, Honorable Speaker. In Kirinyaga County, as I speak, our land has become so small, Honorable Speaker, that subdividing the same for future generations is no longer tenable, Honorable Speaker. It is why we must ensure as a House that we support this bill, Honorable Speaker. We enact this legislation, Honorable Speaker, so that we can be in line with the recommendations of the judiciary and expedite delivering the plan to the people of this nation, Honorable Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Member for Kathiani, Honorable Mbui.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity to also make a contribution on this affordable housing bill. Madam Speaker, as we begin this debate, I would have loved to have heard the majority leader tell us when we are getting our refund for the deductions that were done in January on monies that the court said should not have been deducted. Because, I mean, we as a House must also be alive to the fact that we operate in a country that is legal. So when the court pronounced itself and said there are no further deductions to be made, I was shocked that actually in January my pay slip reflects that the government has taken from me 1.5%, and I'm expecting my employer has also paid 1.5%. That is an illegality. So I would like to understand, first thing we need to know is when are we getting our refund, our money back? Madam Speaker, let us discuss this matter and demystify the obsession that Kenya Kwanza seems to have with the issue of houses. And Madam Speaker, it is an obsession because we are fighting to build houses for personal individuals when our children in this country do not even have classes for grade 9. And at the end of this year, junior secondary is supposed to have grade 9. Here we are talking about building houses. We are not a communist country, Madam Speaker. Communist countries are the ones that figure out personal things. We are a capitalist nation. People go to school, and then you go out there and fight for your space and get your resources. So, Madam Speaker, I feel that we seem to be losing the script. But, Madam Speaker, allow me to deal with dispel myths that have always been talked about in this housing project. First one, we have been told here over and over again in public barazas in the House that affordable housing is going to create employment. Let me tell you, Kenyans are not looking for part-time employment, casual employment. People are looking for jobs that are permanent and pensionable. Those are not the jobs that are being offered under this arrangement. The jobs that are being offered here are jobs that will be done for a period of maybe a month, 2 months, maximum 3 months. All the homes we live in were built by people. Are they building now? Are those masons still working there now? Madam Speaker, we must figure out how to create employment and stop deceiving Kenyans and telling them that this thing of housing is going to make them, permanently employed. Madam Speaker, it's also important to note that there's another myth that was peddled during the period of campaigns. And people are told it's bottom up. The people at the bottom of the bracket are going to be brought up. Madam Speaker, now it is clear that Boda Boda and Mama Mboga that were talked about during campaign trail are going to be deducted money for houses that they will probably never own because they can't afford them. Madam Speaker, that is the reality. But Madam Speaker, let's talk about some of these issues that are also constitutional. The issue of housing is actually devolved to the county governments. Fourth schedule is very clear about the responsibilities that are assigned to national government and those that are assigned to the county governments. And I want to confirm that part 2, subsection 8 of the fourth schedule clearly indicates that housing is actually a function of county government. So, Madam Speaker, as we deal with this, we must know that the national government has only got one role, and that is policy. Not implementation, not in building houses, not in getting land from members, that is not the purpose of the national government. Madam Speaker, on the matter of the levy, because this is one of those things that even when Kenyans did public participation, they said no to. And public participation was actually stopped by the courts of law. And somehow, one of the committees of the House sneaked all over the place and carried out some arrangement of public participation, which was actually illegal, Madam Speaker, if you are to ask me. But then the reality is this, that the levy was already denounced by Kenyans. 90% of Kenyans, during the public participation on the finance bill, said no to the issue of the levy. But now, Madam Speaker, let's talk about that levy. Madam Speaker, pay-as-you-earn income tax are generalized taxes that everyone pays. Madam Speaker, excise duty, VAT, are those taxes that are charged, and only consumers of the goods and services pay that. It's like a toll on the road. It is only the user of the expressway that pays the toll. Now, why is it that you're making every Kenyan pay for houses and not every Kenyan will be a consumer? There are Kenyans, Madam Speaker, who already have mortgages. They are paying mortgages. Civil servants, teachers, public servants that are already actually so high in debt because they are paying for their mortgages. And then you are taking away 1.5% and telling them now you're going to build houses for other people. Madam Speaker, I find this very, very unfair. But Madam Speaker, as I finish, it's important to talk about the regulations because there are regulations that will eventually be made on the basis of this bill, just in case this bill passes, because I personally am opposing it. Just in case the voting block will be used to pass this thing in the House, I want to point out some of the dangers that we face. First and foremost, what is the valuation and how will the valuation of the houses be done? We are aware that currently some of the affordable houses are more expensive than commercial houses that are being put up by developers. And Madam Speaker, is shocking considering the land is given for free by government and the money that is being used is taxpayers' money. How does an investor buy land and then take a loan and build a house and charge less than what is being charged by this affordable housing? It is unfortunate, but this smells of a scam, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the other issue is the repayment period. Because the law here does not talk about the repayment period. When we are making regulations, if this passes, let us be careful to name the repayment period. You cannot leave it open-ended. Because, Madam Speaker, I will tell you what I have noticed here, that there are three categories of houses, and they talk about the earnings of the people. And then they are saying that for you to acquire this, you must be able to afford 1/3 of your salary. And there are some people who have been named here that have earned salaries less than 20,000. A person earning 15,000, Madam Speaker, would pay 5,000 a month. A house of 3.5 million, Madam Speaker, would take them 58 years to pay. What repayment period is that? Is that even heavenly possible? Who can start working and be paying for a house for 58 years? So the repayment period must be thought through and discussed and put in the regulations so that we can address it. And finally, Madam Speaker, the Section 31, subsection B, talks about application for allocation. And it says that the agency will make decisions on any other information that may be determined. In essence, what we are doing, we are actually inappropriately delegating powers of this House to the Cabinet Secretary. Because the minute you say that they can make regulations further, they can make those decisions later, and you are not asking or compelling within the bill that this be part of the regulations, then it means you are giving them an open check. They can decide tomorrow it is tall people who will get the houses, it is short people who will get the houses, it is people of less than so many kilos. Madam Speaker, we must be very, very specific. But with those few remarks, Madam Speaker, I feel that this, Madam Speaker, is a bill that we cannot support, and I oppose.
Before we get to the next speaker, allow me to acknowledge students in the public gallery. Number 1, Diamond Junior School from Starehe constituency, Nairobi, and USIU Africa students from Roysambu, Nairobi County. On your behalf and the House, we welcome them to observe the proceedings of the House. The next chance will go to the member for Sigowet Soin, Honorable Justice Kemei.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity you've given me to contribute to this bill. On the onset, Madam Speaker, I wish to say I support the bill. And I support the bill, Madam Speaker, with 4 reasons. Number 1, Madam Speaker, when we fought for independence in this country, we promised our people that we would give them shelter among other basic requirements. Madam Speaker, this is the first deliberate step that we've taken as a nation to make sure that our people have reasonably good accommodation and providing good shelter for them. Secondly, Madam Speaker, we have a big problem of unemployment in this country. And if you go to construction sites, wherever you see some construction taking place, Madam Speaker, you will see quite a number of Kenyans milling around looking for employment. The housing project, the housing program that will come out of what we're discussing today in Parliament, Madam Speaker, will ensure that the majority of the people who are unemployed in this country get a means of earning an income, even if it is for a short period. And Madam Speaker, we are not talking about laborers alone. We are talking about the professionals in the entire spectrum of employment in this country. We are talking of architects, we are talking of engineers, we are talking of electricians, we are talking of masons, Madam Speaker. This is a very, very good program in which they will be able to get employment. Thirdly, Madam Speaker, I wish to ask the supporters of the bill, and particularly the leader of majority who has brought the bill to Parliament, please make sure that housing is spread all over the country. We must make sure that housing is not in the Nairobi alone, housing is not in the cities alone, housing should be spread to all parts of this country, so that when we look at Kenya, we're looking at a country that looks like the rest of the world. Madam Speaker, finally, if I asked my good friend, Honorable Opiyo Wandayi, to raise his hand, Madam Speaker, it doesn't matter which hand he raises. If he raises the left hand, he has raised his hand. If he raises the right hand, he has raised his hand. So, Honorable Opiyo Wandayi, my good friend, this bill is good, however you look at it. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I support.
I see Honorable Opiyo Wandayi looking at you suspiciously. Just to confirm, we were just saying, he was saying something good about you, as a good friend. The next chance will go to the member for Ugenya, Honorable Ochieng.
Madam Speaker, thank you so much for this opportunity. Madam Speaker, all governments over the world get defined by the things that they do during the time they've been given by the citizens to govern. Governments come to power with their own plans. And this government, Madam Speaker, has decided that this is one thing that they will rise or fall with, that they will make sure that they dignify and humanize the way Kenyans live, that they will ensure that Kenyans are able to get houses that are habitable, houses that dignify them, regardless of how much they earn in their place of work, Madam Speaker. And that's why, Madam Speaker, I want to support this bill, Madam Speaker, because affordable housing is a real issue in this country, Madam Speaker. If you go around the country, it's just not in the slums, it's all over the country. The houses people live in, Madam Speaker, you go to some places in Nyanza, some places in the coast, they are not fit for human habitation. And that's why you are saying, Madam Speaker, that government is required by law to ensure that the housing system that's in the country supports dignified lives under Article 25 of the Constitution, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, number two, the reason this housing program is very important is to help stimulate the construction industry in this country, Madam Speaker. We need to ensure that the housing industry is able to support jobs. And before I go far, Madam Speaker, I want to tell my friend, Onde Bumbui, that we are not looking at Mijengo jobs. Madam Speaker, the housing industry starts with steel, cement, it goes all the way to timber. It is not Mijengo jobs of 2 days, 3 days, Madam Speaker. It is a whole industry, Madam Speaker. And that's what, Madam Speaker, I want to say, that one thing that we as MPs must do is to ensure that this housing, affordable housing fund is able to help us give rise to industries that will come because of the housing sector boom. Madam Speaker, I say this because in the last 8 years, Madam Speaker, we spent 500 billion shillings, Madam Speaker, to build a railway line, but without a single town, without a single industry, without a single city being built on the wake of 500 billion shillings, Madam Speaker. When we built the railway line, Madam Speaker, when we did the railway line, we were importing cement, we even imported sand because we allowed Chinese to bring here prefabricated rolling stock. We allowed Chinese to bring bolts and nuts. We allowed Chinese to bring everything, Madam Speaker. And so I want to request those who will be in charge of implementing this housing fund that, first of all, we must ensure that the procurement is done right. Madam Speaker, personally, I've had an issue with the way we've gone implementing this housing scheme so far, because we want to have Juakali sector benefit from this housing scheme. We want to have our own industries benefit from this scheme, Madam Speaker. And we cannot go to launch a housing scheme in Homa Bay, and we have not prepared the Juakali sector there to prepare the hinges, the doors, the windows, Madam Speaker. You cannot go launching them in Mombasa, and you've not prepared the Juakali there to. Madam Speaker, I support this bill, but I believe that sequencing is going to be key to ensure that the gains that we're going to make in the housing boom goes to the common management, Madam Speaker. Number two, Madam Speaker, the biggest issue today in the country is, do we have a framework for equitable distribution and allocation of these houses, Madam Speaker? I want to lead with the majority leader because this is important to me. The question that's being talked about by Bondai and Bombui, we should provide solutions. If you believe that this bill currently does not provide for a way of getting Mamamboga and Bodaboda getting houses, let's write it in the law. Let's put a quota for them. And I'm going to convince the majority leader that we must have a quota under Part 4. Let's have a quota for those kind of people, Madam Speaker. Honorable Ichunga, I hope
Honorable Ochieng, Honorable Wandai has a point of order. What is out of order?
Actually, I didn't intend to interrupt my good friend and neighbor, Honorable Ochieng, but I really want to understand whether he's in order for him to direct his address to us, I and Honorable Robert Mbui, and to demand that we provide solutions to the affordable housing crisis. Honorable Speaker, is that conceivable? Is that really conceivable? Honorable Speaker, can you rule him out of order?
Honorable Ochieng, did you address the Honorable Member for Ugenya, for Uguja?
Madam Speaker, that is what a responsible position does. It doesn't just oppose for the sake. Our position that is responsible provides solutions. We don't just say this is wrong. You tell us how to do it right. And in this bill, I believe that instead of saying that there's no place for Mamboga and Boda, tell us how to improve it. And I'm going to talk to the majority here, Madam Speaker, that we provide under Part 4 quotas. We must have the quotas for those Bodas. You must have the quotas for the Mambogas. You must have a provision that says that if 100 houses are built in a place, 40 of them will go to Mamamboga or Bodabodas. We must have that in the law. That's the way to go. You don't just say it's wrong and you keep quiet. You say it's wrong and provide solutions on how this can be done. Now, Speaker, all over the world, we've talked about Singapore, we've talked about Taiwan and Malaysia. These countries grew on the back of housing booms. What's going to mess our housing program, Madam Speaker, for me, is corruption. It's corruption. That's what we're talking about. To ensure that these big projects are going to be corruption-free, Madam Speaker. We can make a good law in this parliament, but if you don't follow up with implementation and ensure that things are done the right way, Madam Speaker, will not go anywhere. And that's why I believe that I will propose an amendment to this bill on a section for procurement. We'll not leave this to procurement laws. We'll make a provision on how we'll procure the materials to be used for this concern, Madam Speaker. We don't want people lying to us that we bought cement at Portland or we bought cement at Savannah and they're importing the cement. We will ensure that timber being used is bought locally. We'll ensure that everything being used in these programs are locally sourced. For me, Madam Speaker, those are things that I expect my colleagues to talk about. How do we ensure that this becomes one of the systems, one of the programs that are able to make sure that we get money through Buy Kenya, Build Kenya? Madam Speaker, I will not keep quiet. If we are going to be launching houses and we are importing cement, I will not keep quiet if we are going to be launching houses and we're importing timber. I will not keep quiet if you're going to be launching houses and we're importing steel. All this must be sourced locally for what the President has promised to come to fruition. Let's ensure that for once, Madam Speaker, we do this in a manner that creates jobs systematically. If we source timber locally, the timber industry grows. If you source cement locally, the cement industry grows. If you source steel locally, the steel industry grows. If you source the technology locally, you transfer that and the industries grow, Madam Speaker. That's what I would require to see happening. Madam Speaker, Kenyans are concerned about the possible favoritism in distribution of these houses and allocation. And that's why, Madam Speaker, we must have a proper system that does not involve human intervention. And I'm happy that this president and this government has decided that they're going to digitize things. Majority Leader, I want to request you, let's digitize the allocation of these houses. Let this not be about someone sitting somewhere and saying that so-and-so gets, so-and-so doesn't get. Let's have a way, even if it's a lottery or a coupon system, let's ensure that we avoid things that will make this not work, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the communities that are giving their lands, the communities giving their lands for these projects, Madam Speaker, must also be looked into. If you are building houses in Ugenya, you must tell us that out of these 100 houses, at least you put aside 20 for people from Ugenya. If you are building houses in Mathare, you must ensure that we are providing 50% of these houses from other people, Madam Speaker. This is a serious project for the president. It must succeed. I don't succeed if there's discipline. If you follow the law to the letter and how we're going to implement this, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I've looked at who are represented in the board that is being proposed, Madam Speaker. And I'm going to again plead to the Majority Leader that in that board, we must have a person from the Juakali sector. In that board. In that board, get a person from from KEPSA, guys who sell these materials for construction. Let's not just have FKE and KOTU. Let's have the Juakali sector who are supposed to benefit from this so that they also represent, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to plead to those doing these projects. We cannot be demolishing good houses to build better houses. We have to negotiate. You can't go to Kakamega, demolish houses that were built 2-3 days ago. Go to Bungoma, demolish houses that are built 2-3. These are people who have not done anything wrong. Talk to them. Agree with them that yes, we want to build a bigger thing here. We can't allow Chinese to be building very serious things in Kileleshwa, interfering with their planning, and then you go to Bungoma, Kakamega, and demolish. Let's do this in a humane manner. Let's make this work for Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. Madam Speaker, where Kenyans have concerns, let's address them, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to finish by saying this, that
30 seconds, wind up.
I've heard people talk about people contributing money and they don't get house. Madam Speaker, there are those who pay their taxes, which we use to pay school fees for our kids. They have no kids. There are those who pay their taxes, which we use to run the health system. They have not become sick. They are not going to hospital, Madam Speaker. So an argument that because you're not going to get a house, you shouldn't be taxed, Madam Speaker, is wrong. There are people who have paid money for school fees and bursaries. They have no kids. So this is social housing. We as a country must carry each other along. We cannot say that because I can't pay for what I will not need. Madam Speaker, our humanity, our Ubuntu-ness, our belongingness requires that those who have help those who don't have acquire, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to wish the President well in this particular program and request Parliament that let's keep our eyes open. When our people give money for this project, it must be used for the right reason. Corruption must not be allowed in this project. Madam Speaker, I support and thank you.
Before we give the next person, allow me to interrupt the business of the House to order number 5 on papers. And honorable members, I will give a guide on the tabling of budget policy statement and medium-term debt management strategy for the financial year 2024-2025. Honorable members, this guide relates to the submission of 2024 budget policy statement and 2024 medium-term debt management strategy. As you may be aware, Section 25 of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 requires the National Treasury to submit the budget policy statement, BPS, to Parliament by 15th February each year. In this regard, I wish to inform the House that in compliance with the said provisions of law, the Cabinet Secretary of the National Treasury for the National Treasury and Economic Planning has submitted the 2024 budget policy statement, the 2024 medium-term debt management strategy, and the attendant documents. Before permitting the leader of the majority party to lay the BPS and the debt strategy on the table of the House, allow me to guide the House on the next steps to be taken. Honorable members, Standing Orders 232, 5 and 7 provides as follows, and I quote, number 5, upon being laid before the House, the budget policy statement shall stand committed to each departmental committee to consider and make recommendations to the Budget and Appropriation Committee within 7 days of committal. 7, within 14 days following the tabling of the budget policy statement, the Budget and Appropriation Committee shall table a report in the House for consideration in accordance with the provisions of Section 25(7) of the Public Finance Management Act. It is therefore expected that immediately upon being laid, departmental committees will forthwith commence consideration of the BPS in accordance with their respective mandates and submit their reports to the Budget and Appropriation Committee. Thereafter, the Budget and Appropriation Committee will table its report on the BPS to the House within the set timelines. Honorable members, order, Honorable Opio. Honorable members, I also wish to remind the House that the consideration of the BPS ought to be preceded by consideration of the debt management strategy. Of note, a resolution of the House on the debt management strategy sets the appropriate limit on proposed domestic and foreign borrowing for the next financial year. For clarity, Standing Order 232A, 4 and 6 provides that, 4, within 10 days following the tabling of the debt management strategy, the Public Debt and Privatization Committee shall table a report in the House for consideration. 6, the House shall consider the report of the Public Debt and Privatization Committee on the debt management strategy before considering the report for the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the budget policy statement. I therefore urge the Public Debt and Privatization Committee to expedite consideration of the 2024 debt management strategy in order to clear the way for the consideration of the BPS. I will now allow the Leader of the Majority Party to lay the 2024 budget policy statement and debt management strategy. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Thursday, February 15, 2024. 1, the budget policy statement. 2, the 2024 medium-term debt management strategy. 3, the medium-term revenue strategy for the financial year 2024-2025, financial year 2026-2027, and 4, the 2024 budget policy statement, non-financial indicators for the financial year 2024-2025, and the medium term. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Asante. Zamu inayofuata mbunge wa Mombasa, Mheshimiwa Zamzam.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika. Na mimi niweze kuchangia mjadala wa leo. Mheshimiwa Spika, pesa ambazo zinakusanywa kwa wananchi, leo nimepata kuelewa kuwa ni bilioni 63 ambazo zimekusanywa kwa housing levy. Hizi pesa kwanza, mahakama ilivyobandua mambo ya housing levy, hizi pesa zinafaa ziregeshwe kwanza kwa wananchi mpaka vile mahakama itakapoamua. Nafikia wamepeleka rufaa, tuelewe kuwa itakuwa namna gani. Mheshimiwa Spika, nyumba zimejengwa hata Mombasa, tumeona watu wakatolewa katika nyumba zao Pakistan, wakaambiwa nyinyi ambao ni maskini, nyumba zikijengwa hapa mtakuwa nyinyi wa kwanza kupawa hizi nyumba. Mheshimiwa Spika, mpaka leo wakazi wa Pakistan nyumba zimetimia, na mimi nilisikia yule ambaye alikuwa amepewa hii contract akisema kuwa mikono yake imefungwa. Aliomba kabisa, nikisikia na masikio yangu, akawa anaomba, nasema basi tuwape hawa watu waliotoka katika hizi nyumba, tuwape kwanza nafasi ya kuingia. Hawakuweza kuregeshwa pale. Mheshimiwa Spika, nyumba zile zauzwa milioni 7, milioni 5. Mheshimiwa Spika, tusifanye mambo ya danganya toto. Ukaweza kumdanganya mama mboga na yule muuza viazi na yule mwenye kusukuma mkokoteni kuwa hizi nyumba zitakuwa nyumba zao. Mheshimiwa Spika, kumbe tunawahadaa wananchi. Mheshimiwa Spika, mambo ya ujenzi wa nyumba nafikiri yalianza kule mwanzo, hata wakati wa Mheshimiwa Uhuru Kenyatta aliweza kufanya sehemu hapa upande wa Kibera, upande huu mwingine. Lakini Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi nataka nimpongeze Mheshimiwa Uhuru Kenyatta kwa sababu watu walioingia pale ni wale watu waliokuwa wametoka katika yale manyumba wakati yanabomolewa, na wakapewa hizo nyumba, wanalipa 2,500, 3,000 mpaka watakapomaliza wachukue zile nyumba. Lakini kwa sasa mambo yanaendelea ni hujuma. Mheshimiwa Spika, nyumba za bomolewa. Kwa mfano juzi wamebomolea watu wa Changamwe zile nyumba, lakini hata ile notice, tunajua pengine nyumba zingine ni za kwao, hata ile notice pia kupatia mwananchi imekuwa ni ngumu. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi ningependa kiongozi wa wengi alioleta mjadala huu atuelezee huyu mama mboga, huyu bodaboda anashinikizwa vipi ndani ya mambo ya housing levy, wakati ambapo hayuko kazini. Wale ambao wanafanya kazi ndio ambao wanakatwa hizi pesa. Je, huyu mama mboga ataingizwa vipi pale? Aweze kutuelezea hapa Mheshimiwa Spika. Mheshimiwa Spika, ni dhahiri kuwa wafanyakazi wa serikali wengi walikuwa wamechukua pesa ili kuweza kuchukua loan kuweza kujenga zile nyumba zao, na wana manyumba yao tayari. Ni dhulma kubwa wao kukatwa sasa tena pesa za housing levy, wakati ambapo yale mapeni hawawezi wakatumia wao. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, serikali na mashamba mengi sana. Hata pia wananchi pia wengine maskini wana mashamba yao. Mheshimiwa Spika, kama serikali kweli inataka kujengea mwananchi nyumba, mbona wale ambao wanakaa kwenye nyumba ya matope katika mashamba yao wasiende kule wakawajengea nyumba za kisasa? Wawaambie sasa mtakuwa mwalipa 2,200 mpaka mmalize, lakini muwe katika nyumba ambao ziko thabiti. Mheshimiwa Spika, lakini yale ambayo tunaweza kushuhudia ni uvunjaji wa majumba, kunyang'anya watu mashamba yao, kudhalilisha Wakenya. Wakenya wanalia huku nje. Mheshimiwa Spika, na mimi nataka niulize swali moja tu. Kwa sasa Kenya ina deni ya trilioni 11. Na tumemsikia juzi Mheshimiwa Rais akisema kuwa madeni yamekuwa mengi, kulipa inakuwa mtihani. Wewe una deni linalokusumbua, kwa nini uchukue pesa tena uende kuweka kwa vitu ambavyo Wakenya hata hawana haja nazo? Wakenya wakipiga kura walitoka ndani ya majumba yao, hawakutoka msituni. Mheshimiwa Spika, haya mapeni ambayo anachukua kujengea majumba, Mheshimiwa Spika, alipe deni tumuelewe, anachukua lakini analipa deni. Mheshimiwa Spika, sio madeni yanazidi kukua, wananchi wanalia, pesa zao zinakatwa. Kwanza ile fuel levy 16%, hiyo ilikuwa inatosha kufanya haya mambo yote, kwa sababu alikuwa ameenda extreme. Mheshimiwa Spika, tusizungushane huku na huku 10 kibaten. Mheshimiwa Spika, Wakenya wamechoka na goji kiriba goji. Mheshimiwa Spika, Wakenya wanataka Mheshimiwa Rais aweze kuongeza production. Mheshimiwa Spika, ukiweza kuingia kwa mshahara wa wananchi, mwenyewe wana madeni chungu nzima.
Haya, kiongozi wa walio wengi ako na hoja ya nidhamu.
Asante Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, kwa hoja ya nidhamu, najua kuna mswada wa kuongea mambo ambayo kwa lugha ya kimombo tunasema relevance, na nasikia mheshimiwa yale mambo yanayohusu hoja iliyomo mbele yetu. Nimesikia mheshimiwa Zamzam akiongelea fuel levy, na kwa mambo ya manyumba sijui fuel levy ni gani hiyo. Labda mheshimiwa Zamzam atuelezee hii fuel levy ni gani. Nimesikia akiongea mambo ya order za koti ambazo ziko changamwe, ambazo hazihusu mswada. Madam Speaker, naomba tu mjulishe mheshimiwa Zamzam.
Patia mheshimiwa Zamzam dakika moja atakujuza.
Mheshimiwa,
umetaja kodi tofauti.
Mheshimiwa kiongozi wa wengi, ikiwa mwalimu alikuwa anafunza darasani na hukumuelewa, hiyo si shauri yangu. Yule mzazi wako alokulipia school fees atakuuliza ukifika nyumbani. Mheshimiwa Spika, Mheshimiwa Spika, hizi zote ni ushuru zinazokatwa wananchi. Kitu ninachosema, kwa nini uongeze ushuru mwingine katika ushuru ambao ulishakata zamani? Tumia ule ushuru uliokata 16%, fanya haya mazagazaga yote ambao wataka kufanya, kwa sababu Wakenya tayari washadhulumika katika ile 16%. Kwa nini tuje tuwafinye tena na housing levy, wakati hata bodaboda hajui mambo ya mshahara ni nini, mama mboga hajui mshahara ni kitu gani? Maskini ya Mungu, nimeona wameingia mpaka vibanda, sijui itakuwaje Kenya. Ukitaka serikali ama taifa lako liende kwa uthabiti, Mheshimiwa Spika, punguza ushuru, zidisha mazao. Ukizidisha mazao, Wakenya watakuwa na furaha ya kukatwa ushuru. Mheshimiwa Spika, na mimi napenda kuelezea wenzangu mlioko upande ule, najua wengine pengine wana shida zao nyingi, na mpaka wanakuwa kama vile wajua maiti akiwa na inzi umfeta mpaka kaburini. Mimi nataka kuambia Mutaogopa pengine zile shida zenu mlizonazo, mwataka msaidiwe kule juu, lakini mkirudi kule chini kwa wananchi mutapigwa makatafunua, mutaenda kulilia na shida zenu kule chini. Ni wakati jumba hili lisimame na wananchi wa Kenya. Ni wakati jumba hili liweke misingi thabiti ya kuweza mtetea mwananchi wa kawaida. Ni wakati jumba hili, uko kwenye serikali, uko kwenye upinzani, lakini simama na watu wako, mwambie rais, hii housing levy imezidi sana. Mheshimiwa Rais, tunakuomba basi ile ulochukua ile 16% fanya huko maneno yako, lakini haya mengine jamani, mhurumie mwananchi wa kawaida. Kila mahali, Mheshimiwa Spika, ukiona kiongozi wa taifa anakwenda kila mahali kisha anazomwa, si ishara nzuri. Mheshimiwa Spika, ni ishara kuwa Wakenya wamechoka, ni ishara kuwa Wakenya wanahangaika. Mheshimiwa Spika, na mimi sisemi kwa kuchukia, nasema kwa kutengeza, kwa sababu leo kesho Mheshimiwa Rais akienda kukaa kando peke yake atasema Mama Zamzam alisema ukweli, nyinyi wenzangu ndio mnaonidanganya, mnazidi kunididimiza. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwa hiyo Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi naongea kama mama ambaye niliweza kuuza sambusa, naongea kama mama ambaye niliweza kufanya kazi kama housekeeper kule Saudi Arabia. Mheshimiwa Spika, sisi hatujui mambo ya mshahara, kukatwa housing levy, hatujui kuendaje. Kwa hiyo wasitumie majina ya mama mboga, wakatumia majina ya mvuta mkokoteni kudhulumu wale wafanyakazi ambao tayari katika mishahara yao wakati mwingine inasoma zero salary. Mheshimiwa Spika, wananchi na wabunge wenzangu, mwambieni rais ukweli. Mambo enda yombo, mambo kangaja, huenda yakaja. Kenya yadidimia, musiingize president mahali pabaya. Waheshimiwa wenzangu, hii mambo imekwisha hapa. Hatuoni mama mboga, hatuoni mvuta mkokoteni, tunaona daktari anayedhulumiwa, tunaona mwalimu anayedhulumiwa, tunaona Wakenya wanaodhulumiwa na wanasikia uchungu. Na waombeni, mambo ya housing levy imekataliwa kotini. Jamani, mengine tukubali yaishe. Koti kishasema, mlivyopewa uongozi sisi tulikubali akaisha, na sasa hii housing levy imekataliwa, kubalini yaishe, tuweze kujenga Kenya kwa furaha na upendo bila tax nyingi. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika.
Aya, asante. Nafasi hii mwende Mheshimiwa Paul Nzengu, mbunge wa Mwingi Kaskazini.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. From the onset, I want to say that I have some issues with this bill. First, because I think the way it has been structured and the living that has been incorporated in this bill are not supposed to be levies as such, but I think it shouldn't be money that is contributed to a trust or to a fund in the same manner that NSSF is contributed, so that once you've done contribution over years, you can be able to claim back your contribution either in the form of a house or in the form of the savings, just like NSSF does. Because then the question goes, then if we are going to contribute monies and then people are going to apply for loans, these loans are going to be paid back. These loans are going to be paid back. What happens to the initial capital that has been contributed? Does it mean that the government will then divert that money to some other uses? That is not being informed by this bill. So I think I want to ask the proponents of this bill to look into that. Madam Speaker, I am aware that small business people are going to close down, because then already they are struggling to pay the salaries, and now a burden has been added onto them to match the levy for the employees. Already people are struggling with the burden of paying that small salary that they have been paying, and now an extra 1.5% has been incorporated. So that means an increase into the salary that they are paying. The other issue, Madam Speaker, is on the issue of the eligibility to access to this housing. For example, when you go to the definition, the social housing unit with a plinth of that much, it's targeted a person whose monthly income is below 20,000. I'm wondering where in Kenya, when you have an income of 20,000, how you can save money enough to be able to pay a loan for a house. Those houses, the cheapest is going for around maybe 2.5 million, almost 3 million. How many years will it take for someone who has an income of 20,000, which income has to be distributed between competing needs of the family, including food and other basic needs? Madam Speaker, I want to go, the board is constituted to be able to distribute money to different groups of different implementers of the objective of the bill. The board is supposed to give 30% to National Housing Corporation, supposed to give 30% to Kenya Slum Upgrading and Low-Cost Housing and Infrastructure Trust Fund. It's supposed to give 36% to the Ministry of Housing, and then 2% goes to the collector, who in this case is KRA, and the administrator in this case, who is the board. Now I'm wondering, how is the board going to be able to even coordinate and control all these huge amounts of money that are going to be given to different bodies of government? And then all these bodies have got an administrative arm in their component as they implement the project. Why then do we duplicate administrative cost in 4 different bodies of government when this money should have just been, if that happens? Because of course I oppose, but I know the tyranny of numbers will play against me. But even when that happens, why don't we have a centralized way of just remitting the money direct from Treasury to the implementers? Why do we have to break it down into 3 different implementing agencies? And that is also going to impact on the cost of implementing the project. Madam Speaker, I want to take you to the CEO, the qualification of the CEO, which is clause number 21. If you read clause number 21(2), a person qualifies to be appointed as a chief executive officer if that person has at least 10 years experience in managerial capacity in affordable housing matters, finance, investment, or banking sector. I'm wondering why this has been deliberately left amorphous. Because before you have experience, you must have requisite academic qualification. And therefore, if we are talking about a CEO of a technical organization, that CEO must be a technical person. In this case, must be an engineer, must be an architect, must be a building economist, so that you understand what is involved in building. Buildings have components like foundation. All buildings are based on a strong foundation. And if you give a quirk, because you know when you say that is only experience that is required, there is no academic qualifications that are preferred, then what we are saying is that anyone who has experience does not necessarily have to have an academic qualification. Then it means that you can employ anyone as long as they have been managers. They could have been managing a brewing company or managing a hotel or club, whatever it may be. So I think, Madam Speaker, I want to say that if this will happen, that we are going to go ahead and pass this bill, the qualification of the CEO must be a technical person who has technical qualification over and above experience. And I want to refer you to the section on corporate secretary, for example, on clause number 26(1). There shall be a corporate secretary to the board who shall be competitively recruited and appointed by the board. A person shall be qualified to be appointed as a corporate secretary if that person holds a degree from a university recognized in Kenya. So why are we silent on this qualification on the matter of the CEO? I think I'm clear on that one. And then, Madam Speaker, I go to